Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. So today we are going to continue our microservices series and we are going to create three simple projects. One will be the citizen microservice, one will be the vaccination center microservice, and one will be the Eureka, which is going to have the registry of all the two microservices that we are going to create, so that when we are going to deploy this to cloud and when the properties changes, it should not affect us. So let's quickly create the three starter projects. So basically I'm going to create some Spring Boot starter projects. You can take anything that you want to create the projects. Microservices are just a simple example of small microservice. So basically a small applications. So let's quickly create the citizen service. Now this citizen service, I want them to be in my folder, which is code decode microservice citizen service. Simple. So I want to have the Java version as 8 and the packaging as jar. Language will be same. So this is how we are going to create a simple Java project, Spring Boot project. Now what all we need MySQL driver for sure, because I'm going to create a real database where my citizens information will be saved. So this is a driver to connect to MySQL. This will be the way how we are going to connect my Spring Boot application to database. I need Lombok, so that I don't want getters and setters. I want Spring Web, just because I want to have a UI displayed to it. So there is a Spring Web dependencies. There is basically a Spring Eureka discovery client. This particular starter dependency is going to help us to be discovered from the Eureka server. So Eureka server, I have already told you everything about this theoretical thing in the previous video. If you have not, please look in the description below. I am going to put a link to the previous video. So all the theory is covered there. Here I am just going to demonstrate how we are going to do the things in the microservice architecture way. So this is much is clear. Let me quickly go ahead and finish this project, and let's wait for this project to be created for us. Okay, so as you can see that the citizen service is created and your progress is done. Now let me quickly make you go through the prom.xml that we have created. This is the group ID that we have created during the project creation. This is the artifact ID. So this is my citizen service. This is the description that I am creating a microservice project for citizen service. The name of my project is citizen service. The Java version that I have used is Java 1.8. This is the cloud version. So these are the properties of the versions that we are going to use. That is why you cannot see any version tag here. It is automatically taken from here. What are the main dependencies we have is the Spring Data JPA. So JPA is nothing but a way to connect your Spring Boot application to the database that we are going to create with this DBVR. This is nothing but a plugin that I'll show you. I got many requests and hence I've created this video to explicitly show you how to create the database and how to connect with your application. Now we have web to make our application at least a web application. Now we have Eureka client, so that our application will be able to register with the Eureka server that we are going to create in few minutes. Then we have MySQL connector Java, which is nothing but a way to connect with your MySQL database. Then we have one more thing, which is Lombok, so that in we don't have to put annotation, we don't have to put getters and setters and many things explicitly. We can have the annotations for the same. Test, we don't need it right now, so that's all we have in the pom.xml for the things we have checked during the project creation. Next is to create the application.properties file, the properties. So what you can do is you can create application.properties. The property is simple, but what I prefer is using application.yaml file, because it is more hierarchical and it is more explicit in showcasing the things. So I'm going to create a simple file here, and I'm going to use simple application.yaml file. Application.yml. The extension for YAML is always YML. Now in this application.yaml file, we have things in a structural way. So I'll show you how it is there. So let me quickly create. The first thing you should always do is always create a port for it. Else by default it will go to 8080, and if you forget putting any server.port, you will find a conflict that two applications are using the same port. Please change the port number. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the server.port. So automatically in YAML file, if you wait for some time, you can see you have server.port here, and it is automatically getting adjusted in the hierarchical way. Now I'm going to put it 8081 as this is my first application I'm creating as a service application. I'm going to put my vexation server port as 8082, which is the second one for me. Now I want that my user services to be connected to a database, which is a MySQL database. So what we need to do is we need to create some data sources out of it. So let me quickly create the data source for you. So spring.data source. Now in this data source you need four things mainly. First is the URL that you want to connect to. So my URL will be jdbc : MySQL, which is the type of database I have, / I am going to have my local host as my database to connect, as basically this is on my local. So this is the local host, or else I have to give the server name, that is where I'm going to put it. And now I'm going to create a database of it. So let me create it as a citizen database. Okay, one very important point to be noted here is that I'm going to create this service as on the basis of some design patterns, right? So I want that all my microservices should have their own individual databases, so that at any point of time they should not have a conflict with it. So what I'm going to use the design pattern here is, so that can be asked in your interview question also. So what is the design pattern for the data source you have? I'm going to use one database per microservice design pattern. What I'm not going to use is the shared database for all the microservices design pattern. So in this particular design pattern, each of the microservice is going to have its own database, a separate database. So you need to create this database in your disk or the hard drive or wherever your database is created. You need to create this database, and the tables will be automatically created using this Spring Boot annotations like @entity or all what we are going to use. So this is a simple URL that we are going to create. Then we need to create password. So currently I'm putting it as root. I'm going to tell you later on how to encode this, but right now I'm just putting it in a simple way for us. Then we need a username, then we need a driver class name. So my driver class name will be com.mysql.jdbc driver. So this is my driver name, which is how I'm going to connect my Spring application to my data source, which is nothing but a MySQL database. So it's simple. It's spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto, and I want it as update, as I've already told you. Great. So I have this in place. What else I need? I need spring.jpa.showSQL, so that I can at least see what SQL queries are fired. So I'm going to put it as true. Now if this is done, I also want that I should have spring.jpa.database platform. Why this is important? It is important because it says what platform your database is. So this is also important for making connection between your Java entities and your database. So at least you should have a database platform, so that internally you tell that use these commands to connect with your database, and you should know which database you are connecting to. So my database platform will be MySQL 5 InnoDB dialect. So it's indirectly a dialect for you. So let me quickly go for it. org.hibernate.dialect dct.mysql 5 InnoDB dialect. So I think I'm able to make you understand what all these things are. If this is clear, you should also know that I've already told you in the previous session that always a Eureka server is going to have a name for all its microservices. So you have to put your application name. So I'm going to put spring.application name, spring.application name. If you can see this, my application name I want as citizen-service. Now what I've done is I've created my application completely. I want to create a data source now. So how would I create the citizen DB? Now I'm going to tell you, look at this carefully. Okay, I'll create it again. I'm just going to create a simple root. Okay, so this is my local host. These are my databases. I have not created a database here, so I'm going to create a new database right now. And my database name I want as citizen DB. Okay, this is citizen DB is what I want. And okay, so I have my database created here. It doesn't have tables right now. So now if I have my local host, I have my database created, and this is the local host 3306 which I'm going to connect to. This is the citizen DB that I'm going to connect to. Now this is in place. Okay, so you can see that. Okay, great. So I think we are good with it now. It says I'm going to start my citizen service application. These are some Tomcat initialization, port number is 8081, that's what we have wanted and that's what we have configured. Then it says Eureka endpoint is enabled and hence it is trying to find out the Eureka server. And now it is getting error because Eureka server is not configured. Once you configure your Eureka server, this error will be going. And I'm going to quickly create a Eureka server for you so that this error doesn't come. So how do we create that? So again, the same procedure, I'm going to create a new Spring Startup project and I'm going to put Eureka server here. Eureka server. So this is going to be my project name and I want my artifact name to be the same and I don't want the description to have a wrong thing. So I'm going to update as Eureka server and even my artifact will be updated in my package. Now Java 8, jar, Java, Maven. Now what I want is I want to create a Eureka server. So while creating a Eureka server, there is a simple dependencies that you need to add. You don't have to put everything that we have done because we are not going to create any kind of database interaction. This is just a server and the task of the server is just to make the service discoveries when it is deployed. So just what we need is Eureka server and nothing else. So remember, while creating a Eureka server, your interviewer may trick you asking what all dependencies you have added in your Eureka server. So it's just one Eureka server, that is from Netflix, and nothing else. Remember that. Okay, so now our Eureka server is getting updated. Okay, it says it is done. Let's see the structure and let's see the POM first. So as I've told you, while creating any Eureka server, the only thing or the only dependency you need is Eureka server and nothing else. Don't put anything extra because that's what it is needed. Now again, we have only application.properties. I need one more file to be created, which is application.yaml. So let me quickly create that for you. Now remember, the server port for Eureka is always 8761. So you are going to put the server.port as 8761, which is the default Eureka port. If you are going to modify this, then you have to explicitly put the Eureka server port definitions or the port numbers explicitly in all the application.yaml of your citizen and your vaccination center. So rather than doing that, I'll always prefer using the existing default configured port here. Now let me quickly run it as Spring Boot application. Okay, so you can see the Tomcat is 8761. That's the port that we are expecting. Now you see the error. That's what I was expecting. It says request failed and basically it was unable to refresh. Cannot execute request on any known server. So this is what it is trying. It is trying to execute and get registered to another Eureka servers. So every Eureka server internally behaves as a Eureka client also, because there may be chances that if you have one Eureka server which is going to give you all the information about your microservice, what if your Eureka server gets down? Then you won't be able to identify or search any URLs for any of the services. So that is why it's a good deal that you should always create multiple copies of these Eureka servers, and you can have one main Eureka server having the URLs with the different Eureka servers, which is actually helping you to relocate to your any of the microservice. If you have a Eureka server and you want that your Eureka server should not get registered with different Eureka servers on the same network as a Eureka client, what you have to do is you have to put different properties. So I'll tell you quickly what are these properties. These properties are that Eureka, as if you are behaving as a client, please do not fetch any registry. So I'm putting it as false. You are the only one having the registry. Do not try to fetch it from other sources. Also, I'm saying that please do not register with other Eureka servers. So how do you do that? Register with Eureka server as false. Simple. Okay, so once we are done with this, now the last thing which is remaining is we have to go to Eureka server application and we have to enable Eureka server. That's the last thing that we need to do. Okay. Now since we have enabled our Eureka server, if we try to run it, as a Spring Boot application, the expectation is that error should have been gone, and there should not be any kind of service discovery from Eureka server being a Eureka client to different Eureka servers. So 8761 is the port number, and it says Eureka server is application is started, and let's quickly see whether it is working or not. So see, the Eureka server is started, and currently it says no instance available. Why it says no instance available? Because we have not started any of the other consoles. The only console available here is and the only working application is Eureka server, and hence it says no instance available right now. So this is nothing but a Eureka dashboard where you can see which application is running and what is the URL on which it is running right now. So let's quickly register our citizen service, because while we were running citizen service there was some issue that was that the Eureka client was not found. So to prevent that particular issue, what we have is we have Eureka clients here. So in this Eureka client we have a Spring Boot application. We don't need to enable @Eureka client here, it is now deprecated. You don't need to explicitly do it. So now we have our main resources and we have application.properties, and my name is, remember this name, it is citizen service. Now when I run this application, since it is automatically Eureka client, because we have a dependency of Eureka client here, it will automatically register to the Eureka server that we have created. So if you can see, our application 8081, which is nothing but a citizen service, is now getting started, and now it is getting discovered as a citizen service into our Eureka server. So currently it says no instance available. Let me quickly refresh it, and it says yes, your citizen service is now here, and currently it is running on port number this with citizen service 8081 is the port number. So that's how Eureka server is actually giving you all the information about your microservices. Currently I have just one microservice created, which is citizen service, and it says its status is up. So now if this much is done, let me quickly go ahead and quickly create some packages for you. Now we need to have one entity. Then we need to have one controller. Then we need to have service. Then we need to have repositories. Okay, so this is the basic structure that I've already told you that we should create always. So this is the basic architecture that we have created for our citizen service. Let me quickly close all so that it doesn't create confusions to us. Now the things are running. I don't want my citizen to be running right now, so I'm going to close it. Now I'm going to create a new class, which is nothing but a citizen controller. Now the citizen controller is nothing but a simple controller having @REST controller as its annotation, which makes it a controller for Spring Boot application. So I've already told you about REST controller, right? Now I'm going to create a request mapping. I just want that please identify this controller with some path. And what will be my path? It will be simple citizen, nothing else. Now once I've created that, what I need is I need to create a simple method. So let me quickly test whether this application is working or not. So I'll create a public string test, a simple method, and what I'm going to do is, okay, let me quickly create a response entity for you of type string here, and what I'm going to do is return new response entity with a body of hello and a status as HTTP status. Okay, great. Now if this is done, I want this to be have a request mapping like we have for the class. We need it for a method also, so that it can be redirected, and I can say request mapping as /get, or a better way /test. Okay, so our request mapping is there. Now let me quickly run this and see whether this particular controller is running or not. Okay, so it is started. Now I want my local host 8081 / citizen service / test should work, and it says hello. So it seems that our microservice is working. It's just that we need to create a different entities and services and our logic into it. So I'm going to create quickly a class into it, which is going to be my citizen entity. So this is my citizen entity. What I'm going to do is, I have Lombok in place. So very first thing I need is that it should be persisted into the database. So I should make it as entity. Then I need @data, so that @getters and setters annotations I don't want to put. Now all argument constructor is what I want, and no argument constructor is what I want, because if you put an all argument constructors, no argument constructor will not be there. Now we need private int id. What we need is private string name. I need the name of my citizen, and what else do we need? Now very important thing, remember that we are going to use a separate database as a design pattern. So what we need to do is, we need to have some variable into this particular entity which decides which particular vaccination center this particular citizen has registered to. So I'm going to have a simple int vaccination center ID. Into it, which is going to tell me at which particular vaccination center this particular person has registered to. Now I want this to be auto generated, so I need this to be an ID first of all, and this to be auto generated. So there is something called as generated value, and generated value is going to have strategy, which is nothing but generation type enum, and I want that it should be automatically decided. So we have multiple ways, right? There is identity, sequence and table. If you don't want you to decide, you want identity, sequence or table, and you want the Hibernate to decide which one of the three you want, you can put auto. So that's the beauty of this auto. Then this is nothing but a column. I just need this as a column, and I also need this as a column, because this is how I'm going to identify this particular citizen is registered to which particular vaccination center. So that's the quick way how do we create a particular entity into a database. Now if I try to run this again, I should have a table which is created with the name of citizen. Once the table is created with the name of citizen, what I want is that I should have the ID, name and vaccination center to be its properties. So let me quickly run this application and see whether the table is created or not. Okay, so my application is started. Let me quickly go ahead and refresh this table. Okay, so this is great. We have two tables in place. The very first table is nothing but a citizen table, and I want to see the data. So view data. Currently there is nothing into it. Now we have another table. Now you will be asking that hey, you have just created one entity, what is this another table which is created? Because their entity is only on one particular entity. So what's this Hibernate sequence? So Hibernate sequence is nothing but an internally created, automatically created table created by Hibernate, because you have used generated value. So this particular ID is to be generated by Hibernate. So Hibernate should know which particular ID should be assigned to the next entity whenever you create. So suppose I am the first citizen getting into it. So this is code decode. So I should be given one ID which is automatically generated. So value will be getted from this next value, which is 1. And first I'm going to get a particular person. So I'm going to give you /ID and / I'm going to give a path variable ID. Now I'm expecting that this particular thing is going to behave as a REST endpoint to give me all the detailed information of citizen whenever I'm going to give you an ID. So it's like get by ID is what method I'm going to use, and this is nothing but a path variable. So I'm going to use a path variable here, @path variable, and I want to put it in an integer of type id. Simple. Now what I'm going to have is, now this response entity is going to have the list of citizens. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm creating a particular endpoint where I'm going to give you a vaccination center ID, and I want that on giving that particular ID, I need to fetch all the citizens who are actually registered to that particular ID. Okay, so if this much is clear, what I'm going to do is, okay, so I've told you that in service what we do is, in service we create business logics. So currently I do not have any business logic. I just need that please give me all the entities which are in database with that particular vaccination center ID. So I don't want to do anything, I just want to create a simple list of citizens, list of citizens. Okay, it's already imported, I don't want it, just give me till a list of citizens, and this will be list of citizens equals to, now how am I going to do it? I'm going to create a repository here. So new interface. Why I'm creating an interface here? That is because I want to extend JPA repository. So citizen repository is what I'm going to create here, and I'm going to extend JPA repository. Okay, great. Now what will be the parameters to it? The first type parameter is citizen. So JPA repository is going to take two things. The first is what is the entity, and secondly what is the ID. So ID type is integer in my case. So this is how I've created a simple repository, and what I want is, so the very first focus of creating this microservices, that if I'm going to give you one of the vaccination center ID, fetch the list of citizens for me. So I'm going to create a way to have list of citizens in place, and my method is find by. Now there are just two things, find by citizens and find by list. I want to find by vaccination center. So what I'll do is I'll go into my entity, and what is the name? It is vaccination center ID. So what you need to do going here furthermore is find by vaccination center ID, and just make this V capital. And this is an internal way how to create a method to fetch the list of entities just by giving one attribute, which is nothing, an attribute of entity. So my vaccination center ID was an attribute in entity, and this is an internal method where JPA is going to see, okay, I need to find my vaccination center ID, and I'm going to give you a list of citizens. So what I need to pass here? I need to obviously pass an integer ID, which is nothing but the vaccination center ID, and giving the vaccination center ID, it will give me a list of citizens already assigned to that particular vaccination center ID. So this is how I've created my repository, and going further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to auto-wire my repository. So this is a bad practice, I'm already telling you, that you should not directly auto-wire your database, but or your repository. You should always have your logics written in a service, and from service you should call your repository. But currently I do not have any business logic. I just want a simple query, a query to go and fetch all the citizens on the basis of their IDs. So this is a simple query. That is why I'm just auto-wiring my citizen repository here. So private citizen repository, and I'm going to give a name to it, which is not, okay, just a second, citizen repository repo, simple. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fetch repo dot find by vaccination center ID, and what is this ID I'm going to pass? The ID I'm going to get here, I'm going to pass the same. Now this is going to return me, okay, now what is this list? This is list is nothing but java.util list. Now I want this list of citizen to be passed as a response entity, and as HTTP status as okay. So I hope this much is clear. Okay, let me quickly remove this, and let me quickly remove this also, so that I have my list imported from Java utils. Okay, so my import have Java utils in place. Great. So this is my controller. Let me quickly make you go through what I have done. So I have done nothing. I have created a simple REST endpoint. This REST endpoint is going to have an ID in place. With that particular ID, I have mapped with a path variable, and I'm going to pass that particular ID into my method which I've created in repository. This repository is capable enough in an internal method which is going to find all your citizens based on the vaccination center ID that I'm passing to it. And once I have got the list, I'm going to pass this in a response entity, and this response entity has the list of citizens which is going to be depicted on the UI to us. So this is a simple REST endpoint I'm going to have. So I should have my postman in place first of all. And this is my path which is going to have add as a REST endpoint, and I'm going to have add citizen first of all, and I'm going to have this post of all, and I'm going to create a URL for you. So I'm going to have a post method here. Okay, so rather than having a request mapping, I should have a post mapping here, just to be more okay. Now I'm going to have a add citizen, and I'm going to have the response entity having simple citizen which is added. Okay, so I'm going to have a simple citizen here and type citizen, or you can call it as a new citizen. And so I'm going to have my citizen in place after we save into the repo. Now I'm going to return this citizen that I have saved with a status of OK. Now I'm going to have http://localhost:8081/ what is my request mapping for this? It is citizen right now. So this is citizen, and then what is my path post mapping here? So that is add. Now I'm going to put something to body. So my body should have application/JSON. So raw application/JSON is what I'm expecting, and I'm going to create a simple JSON here. This :1, comma, base another parameter, and this is code_decode, and the last one as vaccination center ID as 1. So these three are going to be nothing but my attributes. So what is the attribute? The first one is ID. So ID is 1, second one is name, and the third one is vaccination center ID. So this is my JSON which is ready with me. So this is the first thing is ID is 1, code decode and vaccination center is again 1. These two are integers. Now let me quickly try to send it. So let's see. Okay, so we have not restarted it after creating. So let me quickly restart it. Okay, so we have done this thing. Let's quickly run debug this application to see whether the debug comes at our point or not. So let's start. Okay, so it started. Let me quickly post this particular thing and see my debugger comes to it. Remember my decision, I don't want it. My new citizen is going to have ID as 0, name is null. That is because we don't have @request body in place. Now I have the request body in place which is of type citizen, and let's see whether this particular issue again comes to us or not. So whenever you have a post mapping, you should have the request body so that it is able to catch your citizen. Currently it was taking the default values which is 0 for integer and null for a string. So we hope that next time this issue doesn't come. So let me quickly run it again for you. So I think this is started. Let me quickly send this again. Great. So it says your ID 1 code decode with vaccination center ID 1 was there. Now let's see whether the data is there into the table or not. So yes, our data is there into table. Now let me quickly put one more request here with id as 2 and code underscore decode underscore new as one more, and again vaccination center id should be 1, so that we have two things at place. So id is 2, vaccination center is 1. Let's see our database is updated or not. So let's refresh it. Now let's see whether we are able to fetch on the basis of the vaccination center id. So how do we fetch it? With a simple this path. So let me quickly create a get method for you. So this is nothing but a request mapping, so I can have anything. So this get mapping is going to have a particular URL, which is this. So this is HTTP localhost 88 citizen. I don't want to add it. I rather want to fetch the ID on the basis of ID, and I'm going to put 1 as the ID. Let's see and see we have two things in place. If you can see, our second controller method is also working, which is ID is 1, code decode, vaccination center ID 1. So we have sent 1 and we have got responses 1 also. So this is working for us. I think this is enough for this particular microservice, which is quickly start creating another service, which is vaccination center service. So what we need to do is we again have to create a new Spring Starter project, and now it will be vaccination center. The same, the vaccination center will be my artifact ID, the project name, the package will be vaccination center, and the same. The things are still remaining the same. And now what we need is, we need a Eureka client. We need to make that as a Eureka client. We need to have a database driver and JPA, a web and Lombok. We don't need to create a Eureka server, and we are doing all this because we need a vaccination center as a service who is capable enough to have an interaction with the database called as vaccination center database, having a table as vaccination center, and we are going to add one vaccination center into it, and then we are expecting that a client, either the postman, is now going to hit your vaccination center with a vaccination ID, and he should be able to not only get the vaccination center all the details like name and address, but also the list of all the citizens registered to it. So how would you do that? I'll tell you how. Let me quickly finish it. Now till the time it is getting, I'll tell you what we are going to do is, we are going to create two pojos. One pojo will be the citizen again, and the second will be the vaccination center. Now vaccination center is going to be added to the database as a pojo or as an entity. Then what we are going to do is, we are going to create a response. That response is what, when client is going to hit you with vaccination center 1, then you should not only get the citizens attached to it, but also the vaccination center name and vaccination center address. So that's why we are creating one more vaccination center here right now. So if you can see, I have my pom.xml ready. So yes, my pom.xml is also a client. Now if it is a client, we need a YAML file. So I'm just going to copy it away so as to prevent our time. Now my server port should be 8082. My database should be vaccination center database. I'm going to copy it. Since we need to create this database here, what I'll do is, I'll just go here and I'll create one more database. Create new database, and name will be vaccination center DB. Good, great. Now the tables are not any, there are no tables created right now because we don't have any entity right now, but we will be creating it soon. So this is how the root will be the password. This is going to be the same, and the name will be vaccination center service. Great. So this is the application YAML done. Now this is no need to put enable Eureka thing, but we are going to do more things to it. Now quickly we'll create, oh sorry, okay, now quickly we'll create packages. So first thing I've told you, we need entities which will be stored. Then we need model which we are going to send back to the client. Model package is going to have that thing. Then we need package called controllers. Then we need a package called as repository. repos. Fine, that is great. Great. Now I'll be creating my entities. Okay, so I'm now going to create a new class, and my entity will be vaccination center. Simple. So vaccination center is my entity. What is it is going to have? If it is an entity, it should have an entity thing. It should have @data again, something similar that we have already done. All argument constructors, no argument constructors, and that is it, I think. And then what is it going to have? Private int id, then private string vaccination center name, so center name, and something similar to that, center id, center address. Okay, simple Pojo. Great. So this is my vaccination center thing ready. Now I'm going to create a new model. So first of all, my model, what I'm going to get back is citizen.java. So I'm going to have the citizen.java in my model, and simultaneously I should have something to return. So I need one more class which is capable enough to return me my response in terms of some basically a list of citizen and also the vaccination center information. So you should have an Pojo to handle both of them rather than giving it separately. So what you should have is one combined response. So I can say it as required response. Right now it's a very bad name, but okay, that's fine. What I'm going to have is again @data, @nor constructor, @or all our constructor, with this we need two things. Private, now we need vaccination center key information, and what else we need? Not only that, we need list of citizens, right? Citizens. So this is the Pojo that is required to be returned from your controller. So we need a controller now. We need a controller class that can be vaccination center controller. What is this going to have? Now this controller is again going to have all the things that we have already seen, right? What are they? @REST controller to make it capable enough to handle your APIs, request mapping, and what is this request mapping going to have? / vaccination center. Okay. Now I need that my vaccination center should be capable enough to handle my adding vaccination centers. So we have something already done here, right? So I'm just going to copy it to prevent the time loss, and we're going to modify it. Okay. Control D, Control Shift O. Great. Okay, so we need repository also. So @autowire. Okay, but then we need to first create a repository. So I'm going to create a new interface, which is center repo. Now center repository is going to extend my JPA repository, and it is going to have what is to be added? Vaccination center, right? Vaccination center is to be added, and its ID will be integer. Great. Now a simple save method we are going to call from here, right? So this controller is going to have autowired private center repository repo. Now this center repository is going to have to be called from here and save as okay. Now this we need as a vaccination center, and control space vaccination center. Okay, so we are going to pass a vaccination center to it, and it is going to add that vaccination center, and they are going to return what we have added. so that we can show to the thing that yes, we have added that to the client basically. Okay, so that can be a vaccination center which is getting added, and the same as a vaccination center which we are going to send back. Vaccination center added, and we are going to just return that vaccination center which is added right now. A simple add path. So I think that is good. We are good to go with this. Let's see. Yes, this is started. And see, I have our vaccination center in place. So this is ID, this is center and center address and center name. So I think we are good with this particular thing. We wanted a vaccination center to be created, and that is created. Now we want to add it. So how do we add? So again the same thing, right? So it's localhost 8080. So we already have it, right? It's just we need to change few things. So again the method should be post. It should be 8082. And this is a post mapping having the vaccination center as the first request mapping parameter, and /add should be there. What should my body be having now? It should be raw of format of type JSON, and then we should have a JSON in place. So how do we create a JSON? We already know, right? How do we do that? It's a key value pair. So something like this of part comma and then something which is going to have something and something. Simple. So what are these parameters going to be? Our vaccination centers attributes. So simultaneously you should understand how do we create JSON into it. Okay, so simply add your attribute names here and create a JSON for the same. Okay, and now what should be my ID? ID should be 1. My center name should be say center 1, and my address should be address 1, suppose. Simple. Okay, I don't want to save it right now, and let's try hitting it. Okay, so it says yes, my center 1 is added. So let's quickly see whether is it added or not. So I'm going to refresh it and I'm going to open it and see my address and center 1 is added. So this is cool. We are good with it. We have created a vaccination center. But is that what we wanted to do? This is just a structure that we have created. But is this what we wanted to do? No. What we wanted to do was something different. What we wanted to do was we need to create a method. So I'm going to create a method which is going to return me a response entity with something we have already created, required response. Now this required response will be returned from a method. So I'm going to create a method, public return type, and get all data based on ID, center ID. Okay, simple. And then we are going to have @path variable, and path variable will be of type integer ID. Okay, so first we need to have the path variable in place. So this can be a get mapping, and it's going to have a path equals to and /id/id. And now, okay, let me do this for you. Okay, now I'm going to have @path variable integer ID. So basically this ID is going to be mapped to this integer ID. Now we need some code and return a response, required response. So how would you do that? So required response you need to create. Required response equals to new required response. Now you need to add something. So what do you need to add? Two things. You need to add the list, the response, required response has two things: the vaccination center details and one more detail, the list of citizen details. So first what we need to do is first get vaccination center detail, then get all citizens registered to vaccination center. Simple. So these two things we need to do. So first we have the repository in place which is going to save it. Now we need to fetch all the vaccination center by ID. So simple find by ID will work for us. So what I am going to do in my controller is first get the details. So how would you get your details? You should have auto-wired your repository. So now repository dot find by ID. Okay, and what ID I am going to pass? This particular ID I am going to pass. What is this going to return me? And dot get is what we are going to give us the vaccination center detail. Great. So now we have vaccination center details from here equals to, which is stored in the database right now. Getting that, you can add it to your response dot set the center. And what is my center? The vaccination center which I just got is what is having all the details. So first task is done. We needed all the vaccination details. So if I pass 1, what detail should I get? I should get all the details of address 1 and center 1. Great. So we are good with this part. Now the second part is tricky. So the second part is you need to connect to this particular service, citizen service, to get your data. Otherwise you won't be able to get all the citizens detail, because this table is not going to have any kind of details of citizens. It's just name, ID and center. So how do you do that? To connect from a service to another service, you need REST template. So let's quickly create a REST template bean here, and so that we will be able to auto wire it. So @bean, and okay, we need load balance here. I'll tell you why, but right now I'm not adding you. I'm just letting you know that why do we need that in a moment. So we need a REST template, and get REST template can be my method name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bean and return new REST template. Simple. A new REST template is going to be returned from here. Once this is done, since it is a bean, now you can auto wire it to your particular class. So how do you auto wire? Simple, @auto wire, and auto wire your REST template. Fine. Write it. Okay. And then we need to import it from the REST template part, and then we are going to do what? REST template dot get for object, and then your URL. Simple. How do you get a data from some URL? So what you do? http://localhost:8081. That's my first service, right? And then you need to get some data, right? So there will be list.class, right? Now this list.class is going to return me something, but first I need to make a URL which connects to it. So how do you create a URL to it? So this is the URL where we need to connect to, right? So first we should take a citizen as the first parameter, something similar to what we have already done in Postman. So this is how I'm going to reach to my controller of citizen service. Now if you get into the citizen controller using this, you need to get into this. So I can add this here just like this, but what is this ID that we need to pass? So ID we need to pass na. So how do we do? Plus ID. ID is already here, so we are just passing /citizen/ID/1. Now once we do that, what we are going to get is list of all the objects. So what does this return me? It returns me a response entity with a list of citizens. So how do we take it? We just take it as list of citizens. Okay, so first get list in place, then get citizens in place. Now we have list of citizen equals to. Now what we have done is we have registered our citizens to a vaccination center, and this is the REST way to get the list of citizens in place. What we can do next is response entity dot set citizens and the list of citizens. So this is good, and what we can return is new response entity of type required response. And what should be returned from here? You should return your required response comma HTTP status as okay right now. Okay, so this is good. Now we are going to try this out. So let's try how this particular thing works. Now this is a get mapping. So what we need to do is a simple thing again, a get mapping with 8082, and what should be my request mapping? First level, that should be vaccination center, then ID and that ID 1. So let's try. Do we get there? So it says okay, we need to close this and restart because I've not entered any of the debugging tool, right? So I need to stop it first and I need to make it run so that you can see yes it is working or not. So let me quickly debug it so that my data gets there. Let's see, do we have some errors here? Great, we don't have any kind of errors right now. So let's quickly put this localhost 8080 in. Great, we have our debugger in place. What does the debugger says? Okay, get the center details. So what is my center detail? 1, center 1, address 1. Great, good job. We have at least one thing in place. So now even if this particular service is down, at least I'm getting my response at least with the center none. Now if this particular service goes down, how to handle it using histories and all I'm going to show in the later part. But currently let's see whether my hit goes to this particular thing or not. So let's see, list of yes, great, my list of citizen is also here with me now. And what is this list of citizen that we have got? That is nothing but name is code decode, another is code decode 1, and both are related to vaccination center 1. So this is perfectly fine, and when we do F8 we should be able to see our data in response. So can you see your center is 1, center ID is 1, your citizen is 1, code decode 2, code decode new. So you not only have your center detail but also your citizens detail at place at the same time. So this is the beauty of having microservices in place. Hitting just one microservice at 8082, you have data from all 8082 and 8081. Now you will ask me that, see, this is the localhost 8080, what if I put this thing onto cloud? Will this particular thing work? No, it will not work. So I need to continuously modify this. So what I can do is I can put it to property file. I'll show you how later on, but we can put it to property file. But again, you have to change every time your particular URL. So what is the way to not to do that? The way to not to do this already in front of you. What is that? That is nothing but your Eureka. So see, you have two services up and running, citizen service and vaccination center service. I want that Eureka, you should do this for me. So I'm going to put, rather than localhost 8080, just the citizen service. But will this work? No, this will not work. Why it will not work? Because it needs a load balanced REST template. So how to load balance your REST template? With a single annotation, that is @load balanced. Just using this particular thing is also going to get your data to you. Just using this particular URL, you will be good to go. So this is as good as making a call to Eureka service that this is the service I want. Identify the service, where is it, give me the localhost 8080 or whatever the AWS instance address is, and then append this here and get the data from it. So I think this should work for us now. So let's see whether this works or not. So let me quickly stop this. And again I will run this for you in a debug mode. So is it running? Okay, so this is I think started. Now let's do again the same thing. We are going to hit with 1. Now this is not going to change. This is as good as the previous one. My center details are good. I haven't done any change. The change I have done is in this particular URL. So I just want to see, does it goes there or does it gets the data from it or not, using the Eureka or not. Okay, so fingers crossed. Do we have the data? Yes, we have all the data. We have code decode and we have code decode underscore new. So this is the magic of Eureka for you guys. This is what I was trying to make you understand, that even if You don't want to hard code anything here. I'll tell you how to get this from the property file in few minutes. I've already done in the previous video in Spring Boot where I've covered interview questions, but still this is where you get your data from Eureka and not from localhost. So now even if you put all these citizen service and vaccination service to AWS or somewhere, you don't need to have any issue about the URLs. URLs are already maintained by nothing but your Eureka server here, this Eureka server here. So that's the great part about it, and it gives you the particular citizen service 8081 or 8082. All the informations will be here. You don't have to even put your port number also in this part. But the only catch part here is that REST template should be load balanced. And how do you make your REST template load balanced? With a single @ load balanced annotation, nothing else. So I think this much is clear to you. Now in the next video, what we are going to see is that if my citizen service is down, at least my user should be able to get the vaccination center detail. Why is it like if this particular service is down, I'll get null pointer exception or something here, then my response entity will not at all be given to the client. How to handle such scenarios where one service is down, others should still be working. That's the scalability. That's the fault control, fault tolerance. So how to do that, and we are going to see in the next video. Thank you.